Thanks for joining us for today's panel discussion, Unpacking New SEC Regulations with Industry Experts. We have a great discussion planned for you all today. I just want to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. The first is, if you have any questions during the discussion, please submit them into the Q&A box. We'll have time for the speakers to answer some questions at the end. The second is, this webinar is being recorded and it will be distributed through email in the next couple of days. So keep an eye on your inbox for that and feel free to share with any colleagues or anyone else who might be interested. With that, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Jake Olcott, who's the VP of Government Affairs here at BitSight.
Sarah, thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for being on with us today. Really excited for this webinar. We're here today to talk about the new SEC cyber regulations, what they mean for security leaders, companies, and investors. And as you all know, the SEC adopted new cybersecurity regulations back in July. And those regulations impact publicly traded companies, and they mainly focus on three main things. The first thing is that the SEC requires organizations to describe the company's process for assessing, identifying, and managing cyber risks. The second thing is that organizations have to describe boards' oversight of risks and management's role in assessing and managing cyber risks. And the third thing is that the SEC requires disclosure of a material cyber incident in Form 8K within 4 business days of determining that it is material. And I know that many of you have been actively working to develop your company's strategy over the last several months to address these requirements, because the regulations sort of kick in mid-December of this year. And so, for companies and security leaders out there, the goal here is assurance. How can we assure our investors and shareholders that we are effectively addressing cyber risk, that we're reducing the likelihood of experiencing an incident? We know that investors are extremely concerned about cyber risk. It's often the #1 risk that investors say they're worried about, according to surveys. A recent study from Moody's last week definitively demonstrated a link between cybersecurity performance and financial risk. And we can only look to recent events that have transpired over the last few weeks to see that, yes, indeed, cyber incidents can have a material impact on a company and its shareholders. So we assembled this great panel to provide some guidance for you. We're going to hear what some security leaders are doing to respond to the regulation. We're going to hear some specific examples about, how to improve board level communications, how to enhance your cybersecurity program. We're going to hear about an industry-leading transparency report, what it took to build it, what goes into it, how the market perceives it. And you're also going to learn how shareholders and investors are viewing cyber risk and what they're interested in hearing from you. And of course, along the way, you'll hear a little bit about how BitSight can help you address all of these different things and provide assurance to shareholders. So with that as an intro to our topic, I want to go ahead and get started. We've got 3 amazing thought leaders in the fields of cybersecurity and investment management. And I want to bring them to the stage here, and we'll begin with some introductions. I'll start with Roland Cloutier. Is a globally recognized security leader, author, and board member. He's held global chief security officer positions at TikTok, ADP, and EMC. He's been responsible for cyber, data defense, privacy enforcement, operational risk, workforce protection, crisis management, and investigative operations. Roland is an author. He has numerous industry awards. And so, Roland, just so happy for you to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Next up, Chris Klingenspoor is Senior Vice President of International Security and Security Risk for Equifax. He is responsible for leading all regional security programs, and he manages the relationship between the security team and Equifax's global business operations. Prior to Equifax, Chris was at Visa and IBM. Chris, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris. And finally, Jason Mortimer. Jason is head of sustainable investment, fixed income, and he's the senior portfolio manager at Nomura. In this role, Jason is focused on fixed income ESG integration and sustainable investing in global fixed income and credit, as well as green social sustainability bonds and other mainstream impact investment strategies. Jason has developed a variety of Nomura's proprietary corporate ESG scoring, modeling, sovereign ESG scoring models, the net zero bond investment framework, and he pioneered the integration of cybersecurity performance in investment portfolio risk monitoring and investment engagement. It's very late for Jason right now. Jason is in Tokyo, but this is such an important topic that he agreed to stay up late for us. So Jason, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks, Jake. Great to be with you.
Well, gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started here. Chris and Roland, I want to kick the first question to you. Security leaders, I want to start with your reaction. What does the regulation mean for public company CISOs and their security programs?
Jake, well, I mean, a broad question. I guess I'll kick it off. You know, obviously, you covered that there's this new discussion around materiality, and CISOs are really going to have to dig into the business impact of cyber risk and privacy enforcement broadly to these type of issues to help the business understand materiality within the markets for their brand and within their profitability structure. So that's one. That's a deep dive into business. I think the second major change is going to be this bifurcation of responsibilities around cyber. Often a chief security officer, chief information security officer is the senior most security person. And, you know, we go into the board, you know, 1 to 4 times a year, depending on the organization, the audit committee, sometimes the tech committee, depending, you know, on the structures of these organizations. For transparency and talking about risk. But now there's a broader requirement, which is the broader responsibility of management at the CEO, at the business leaders level. So what does that mean? And how does the CISO engage with the other leaders in the organization in their areas of accountability and help structure that? Because this is going to be new for all of the organizations that will be focusing on that. And the last area I'm sure we're going to get into, and I'm really interested in Chris's response here, because this is all about transparency and trust. This is the availability of information to understand what the care coordination and accountability for organizations are going to be around security, risk and privacy issues specific to cyber. And so this means very transparent programs, actionable, repeatable, meaningful capabilities in general that the public can rely on and have faith in, and so those are 3 areas of pressure that we're going to see to ensure that we're engaging with the business and the public.
That's
yeah,
great.
you know,
yeah,
I think that's great framing. You know, I think from a CISO perspective or people operating within the security industry, it's a great opportunity. It's a squanderable opportunity if it's not capitalized on. Right, from a perspective of it really brings security and security management, cyber to the table, right, where they're not already sitting there. It's this opportunity of I'm off the bench, I'm in the game, let me capitalize on this opportunity. And so leveraging that, being able to have those conversations, you know, going through a transformation. We've been very fortunate to have great support across our executive committee, and being able to have this conversation, use this as the catalyst. And I'm very optimistic that this will be that. It will be an opportunity for people to have this conversation with their leaders, with their boards, and put a structure in place that safeguards their company. And it's not just a, kind of a CYA or a check the box activity.
Yeah, just really a great opportunity for the CISO to really step, directly into that business leader role. And we should also acknowledge that there have been requirements, over the last decade or so that the SEC has established, through guidance, for organizations to disclose these things. But of course, there's nothing like a regulation to really sort of bring it front and center. Sarah, can I ask you to pull up our first poll? So we'll kind of go through. We'll have a handful of polls today, and would love for folks to kind of chime in. Our first poll is the SEC regulations are an important topic of discussion within my company today. So go ahead and vote on that. We're going to keep the conversation moving. We'll circle back to some of the poll results. So, Jason, I want to bring you in because ultimately this is a regulation that is designed to inform shareholders and investors, right? I mean, that's really what the SEC's job is, to make sure that the investor community has information and data that it needs in order to make investment decisions. So can you help us understand what investors are thinking? What are they concerned about with respect to cybersecurity? What do they want to know? Help us understand that mindset, that the persona of the investor.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally we have to remember that the role of markets here is to kind of allocate capital efficiently and price these risks. So really, we need this kind of data. We need this type of exposure, transparency to understand that, to do that job basically. We as investors, obviously, we want to be compensated for the risk that we're taking, and I think that it's pretty clear that it's not just about the kind of financial risks or the credit risks and credit ratings, but non-financial factors. Obviously, climate and carbon is a big one, but increasingly we're seeing that there's a lot of other factors out there, like cyber, obviously, and we're seeing how this is playing out, right before our eyes. I think there's going to be a lot more people in the market that will start to understand that this is something that we need to start not just becoming aware, but actually having the tools and the data to price on a systematic, consistent basis across the market. And I think that if we can do that, then we can kind of level up the entire practice of cybersecurity across the market, which I think would be great for companies, great for the societies and nations that we live in. So that, I think, is kind of like my kind of top-down view of where I think this could kind of go. And obviously, where we're starting from is from almost zero information. Most people in the market, I can tell you, are not aware of cyber. It's like an unknown. They don't know what they should be looking at or what they should be worrying about. So just having this type of new regulation coming out from the SEC that's going to require these kinds of things, I hope to see it reflected in policymaking and regulation here in Japan and in Asia and elsewhere. I think that's really going to kickstart this process, which is so important now. And I will just say that, we've put out a white paper actually here at Nomura Asset Management, kind of detailing exactly what we're doing, why we think this way, how we actually built it into our process to take this quantitative cybersecurity data actually provided by your company, BitSight, put that actually into our kind of sustainability investing model as a non-financial data factor, and again, use that systematically. So please check that out, and the link is going to be provided.
Yeah, it's an outstanding report, and really does an excellent job about kind of giving that high level view about investor concerns. For security leaders, the concerns of investors sound very similar to the concerns of the board. Quite frankly, I mean, everybody is like really focusing on sort of the high level business impact, and so I think from a security leader's perspective, you'll see that there's a lot of similarity there. We got the results from our first poll. About 90% of us said that SEC regulations are an important topic of discussion. Probably not very surprised to see that, but anybody have any comments on that before we move along?
Jake, it's been a topic for several years. You mentioned this earlier. Obviously, in K's and Q's, the reporting of risks associated with cyber issues have been important. So I think CISOs of public companies have been facing the criticality of how to design this, how to have the discussion, how to understand litigation in this space with our corporate attorneys and general counsels, and how to create transparency to the board. So this doesn't surprise me at all. Obviously, now this puts a clock, some additional pressures, and some additional oversight on non-security risk or privacy executives within the organization. So making this a whole management issue, not a singular or focused management issue. So this will have, I think, an urgent focus from our peers at the executive level, as well as the board, to ensure that we're confident in our capabilities to answer these questions and then sustainably respond, as necessary, in the course as our business moves forward.
Roland, thanks for that. Yeah, so I want to move our conversation into what the actual sort of disclosures may look like. The SEC really emphasizes that this is a 10K and 8K disclosure issue. Ultimately, it's about providing assurance to investors. And when you look across the corporate landscape, there are lots of different types of reports that companies use to communicate information to their investors in addition to the 10K, right? I mean, we've got ESG reports, we've got sustainability reports, we've got lots of other ways of communicating information to investors. And so, first of all, I want to pop up our next poll question. And I want folks to think about. The question is: we are considering a broad shareholder communication strategy when it comes to cyber reporting. And when we say that, we mean, how do we think about all of the different reports that our company puts out, whether it's the 10Ks, ESGs, et cetera. And Chris, I want to turn to you on this because, Equifax is really considered by many investors to be a leading organization when it comes to cybersecurity disclosure. For the last 3 years, you guys have been publishing the Equifax annual cybersecurity report. And I wonder if you can share that story with us and how it's perceived in the market.
Yeah, thank you. The story is an interesting one. We started that journey really as an internal report, right? Something, as we're going through this broad transformation and up-leveling our maturity and wanting to provide, an annual wrap-up to our executive committee and our board members. We created the first version of this report, which was an internal one. And we felt really good about it. We're like, this is, a great accomplishment, and it resonated. And Jamil Farshi, our CISO, said, you know what, we should share this. And I think the first response was from the team, from the security leadership team, was, well, really, should we? And the second question is, can we? And so that's really what sparked it, right? Was that internal delivery of our program to the board, and then a conversation internally with all of our key stakeholders over the better part of a year or so, about, hey, we've done some research. We don't really see one of these out there, right? Is this something that we could try to lead the curve on, right? To get out ahead of, cyber disclosure, what we're doing as a company. And really, part of our transformation is really all about transparency, right? And so that's really what sparked it. And, we've had great support from our executive committee, our board. Mark Begor, our CEO, is like all in for security, definitely champions it. So it was something that for us was very easy for us to work through all of the various stakeholders and bring this forward. And, the report, I think it's included. Go out and take a look at it. It's on our investors page along with all of our other reports. So it's just generally available. It is been, and it includes various aspects of our security program, right? And it starts, and I love the fact that, when we started writing it, the first time, we went to Jamil and said, hey, let's have you give an introduction. And then when Jamil shared the draft with Mark was like, this is amazing. He's like, can I write an introduction? Right. So we have to, what are you going to tell the CEO? No, sorry. But that just tells you like how passionate he is about our journey and our success as a security organization. And so, it captures what we're doing from a program perspective, what we're doing from a controls perspective, our thoughts about risks within the environment, our own risks. And so, just trying to be open and transparent, it goes back to that, kind of that saying of, sunlight is the best disinfectant. That's really what we wanted to do in our mission for transparency and in building trust. And so it's been received well. We get inquiries, it's often like when we go through a client audit engagement, it's often the first thing that someone wants to talk to us about, right? And we've had a lot of inquiries from companies about like, well, hey, how did you do this? How did you get the buy-in? And just being open about that journey has been great and very responsive from our clients. And I think it's been a great win for us as a company.
Jake, and I think the team at Equifax is always so modest about what they've done for the industry, and I just want to pick up on the point because I'm a big fan of the program, and I'm a big fan of what they're trying to drive from a transparency. But I think, from an external perspective, why I think it has worked so well is that they don't just talk about their program and their capabilities. They talk deep about their risks and how they think about risks and how they make decisions on risk across the company, not just in the security organization. And then they talk about accountability, timeframes, and execution, right? And they're very transparent about that. And not a lot of organizations are. And I think those basic things, the risk, decision process, accountability, start to etch away at what the SEC was getting at, which is, the shareholders and consumers want that level of transparency if they're going to invest at an investment level. And unless you have those three things, you're really not getting that transparency. So again, great program over at Equifax.
If I could just jump in and kind of in this general love fest, it's also something that we've really looked at, and I've already clipped and pasted that thing into a presentation, and just people's eyes here in Asia, they just kind of bug out because it's to show this is the level that's being done around the world now at some of the really leading companies. I think what was really something to keep in mind is that we're looking at thousands of companies we're assessing across a whole entire investment universe of thousands and thousands of companies around the world. So our ability to kind of really dig in and see, and no one is going to be able to understand your company as well as you are from the outside. So we're dealing with limited information there. Thankfully that's something that we're pretty used to doing. But when we see something like that and the amount of work that's gone into it, and especially those kind of objective indicators that say you were in the top 1% for the past 3 years, or this, that is a very, I would say, decision relevant information for us, right? Because if I put together, I see two companies we're looking to invest in, maybe all things being equal, one has got this amazing report. I can see very clearly that this is a very strategic issue for them, that they're investing the resources in and tracking it in an objective way. And the other place is saying cyber is very important and we protect our assets. You can tell which one is going to be a higher conviction for us, where we're going to allocate.
Yeah, just one thing to add there. I appreciate the comments from both of you. I have to say it really comes down to our culture, right? We've established a culture of security first, and across the board, like I said, like I mentioned, Mark and his desire to be included in this. That's really has been the catalyst for us. The win is being able to have that culture that allows us to develop and participate this way.
Well, maybe the SEC regulations can also be a catalyst for other organizations as well. To sort of pick this up. I want to turn to the poll quickly. We're considering a broad shareholder communication strategy. People were a little split on this. Some yes, that they were looking at it. Others were not sure. And I think what I would say is, as you're having these conversations, with your leadership, with other folks, within the company, with investor relations, for example, I think it would be really important to examine how your organization is including these kinds of risks in other cyber reporting in other reporting, and then see how you might be able to fold some of these things into those other reporting efforts as well. I don't know if anybody else wanted to share some thoughts on this.
Well, I think it's important to engage, at the end of the day, Jake. I think, a lot of times we get asked by Treasury or risk as we're creating, the risk for the Ks and Qs, and then we're asked to provide an overview of a program for maybe some sort of sustainability, but to engage at a deeper level in the business and how the business goes to market and which markets they operate in and how cyber impacts that delivery and that profitability, I think are really, really important. So a bigger step forward in engagement so that they actually understand it. Because at the end of the day, we're teaching people a new skill set around what cyber means to the business. In order for us to do that, we have to engage deeper in those parts of the business that it impacts. And so I'm not surprised here, because I think we're typically on the receiving side of, hey, give us information, we're doing this. I think this is, and really, you know, back to Chris's point earlier, this is our opportunity to get off the bench and help go drive the focus for the business in this area.
Yeah, I'll just add in there. I think, you know, the days, you know, when I started my security journey, it very much was, you know, secure in silence, right? And I think as an industry, we have come a long way, and we need to continue to move away from that, right? So do the good things, share what you're doing, because sharing will help you build trust, not only with shareholders, but with consumers. And so I think that's critically important, because, you know, this is coming. And so the fact of the matter is to some extent, you're already doing it. You just don't know it. And so extending it beyond just the single blurb in your 10K about a potential cyber risk is really going to help not only every one of these companies, but our industry as a whole continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah, that's perfect. Chris, we're gonna see how the audience thinks about the idea of a standalone cybersecurity report. We'll throw another poll out there while we move along. Next poll: standalone cybersecurity report for shareholders could be a useful way of communicating critical information about our cybersecurity program. Well, we've already seen from the Equifax standpoint that it's been a total home run. We'll see how other people think. Go ahead and vote on that. I want to turn to a couple. Let's spend a couple minutes on this. You know, with our security leaders, Chris and Roland. I want to get a sense from you guys about, you know, sort of the two main areas that organizations are going to need to disclose more. One is the process for assessing, identifying, and managing risk, and then the other is, you know, this area of, you know, board oversight, management responsibility. So I'm curious, you know, Roland, maybe we'll start with you. What are you thinking that CISOs should be highlighting for investors when it comes to the process for assessing, identifying, and managing risk?
Yeah, I'll go back to kind of those three principles I talked about earlier around actionable, repeatable, and meaningful. I think, you know, investors are not stupid. They understand the space and they understand risk. They may not understand cyber risk, but they know that in order to have your handle on it, that you have to be able to understand it, explain it, do something with it, and that it's a life cycle, you know, in and of itself. So how do you provide that level of transparency, insight about the program is going to be super important. You know, how do you validate it? How do you measure it? And being very clear about that externally in the way that you transmit that externally. I think another important component is this idea about buying down risk. What does that mean? How are you reducing it, and why? It's not just about the measures and finding it and a great risk process and, you know, I'm green, I'm yellow, I'm up, I'm down. Here's my KPIs. It's about, so how are you reducing it, and how is that impactful to the business, and where are we going to see that, the bottom line, right? So that, I think that's a different concept on risk in many organizations. A lot of times we find, you know, critical issues, vulnerabilities, problems, and we translate it in some measurable risk, but we don't always really talk about, you know, total impact to the business, profitability, and then, you know, how that's being bought down across the organization. So being clear about that. And then I think we're really talking about this concept of confidence and risk. Why is the Equifax report so important? Because it's transparent. It lets people know that they're working on it. It's an amazing group. They're confident in what they're delivering. Their CEO's putting a statement behind it, and they're proving it every day. It's not a form once a year that they fill out and send in. I mean, literally, if you read it line by line, you realize that there's major changes and improvements and changes in decisioning and direction, and that shows confidence in your capabilities, and that's delivering trust to the market. And I think that's what we as CISOs need to continue to do.
Yeah, you know, I think it's about that dialogue, right? You know, what we've tried to do, and both mentioned it, is bring forward the risks. Let's talk about the risk, and let's educate our key stakeholders within our business. So it's not just the board; it's every one of our senior leadership team understands those risks, why it's important, and again, building on that theme of the culture of how we understand. So being able to bring that information to them in a way that is meaningful and not just a metric, right? Metrics are important, but it's not just a subset, like I said, a stoplight of green, yellow, red. But something that they can truly understand the impacts to their business, right? So it helps them prioritize. And then also from our perspective, we have to be fair in that process too, to help prioritize the things that we want them to focus on that are the most impactful as well, right? So it's all about that dialogue about risk and how it ties back to the business. I do think, operationally, as you start to roll those things up, I think it's important to be consistent, right? So what we provide up through our leadership chain from an assurance of governance board perspective is a similar set of KPIs and program indicators as well as performance indicators, risk indicators, but we don't change them. And I think sometimes people get in this habit of like, okay, well, I'm taking this to the board. Let me come up with a different set of measures for the board, right? So understanding there's varying levels of degree of consumability with the data, but being able to have it be rooted from the security practitioner or the business owner, and have them understand and have a very similar metric that goes all the way up to the top, so it's consistent in what it is that we're talking about. So we're all trying to speak the same language and not drift too much.
And if I can add on to that, Jake, I think one of the most important things here is learning to speak in the business terms. And I'm not just saying aligning to the business or generally speaking business terms, but really, again, to Chris's point, some of the best reports that I have delivered to the board that are consistent measures quarter over quarter, year over year, are based on financial reports that they're used to getting from the CFO's office, because they speak the business language. Those reports have been developed over years that help run and drive the business. And so simply by moving and articulating security concepts and measures into a deliverable format that the board is used to, you're teaching them and you're educating them. You're giving them really good information about cyber, but in a consumable way with business language that helps them wrap their minds around what you're trying to communicate. So spend some time, with your CFOs of your organizations about how they communicate, and other risk experts in the organization in general, and come up with that aligned taxonomy and communications measuring structure that the board can understand different concepts of legal risk, cyber risk, business risk, in the same format, and help that organization or all those teams lead into that simplified communication methodology.
I think that's such a valuable point in that you have limited time, right? When you're engaging with your board, you don't want to spend that time educating them on the framework, right? Use something that resonates with them, and then tailor your risks into that framework so that it's consumable for them. It's a great point, Roland.
Let's pull the poll results back up. We asked if a standalone cybersecurity report for shareholders could be a useful way of communicating information about our program. Yeah, a lot of you said yes, absolutely. And I think that you can just read the Equifax report to see just how effective that reporting can really be. Chris, I am curious, how do you guys think about including measurements and metrics in that standalone report? How do you think about leveraging something like a BitSight in there?
Yeah, we've been pretty open and transparent with what it is that we share in that report, right? We look for things that we think will provide value, that are measures that are not just our perspective, right? But an independent lens. Like, we use a third party to do a maturity assessment. We leverage various technologies to measure our effectiveness from a controls perspective and share that externally, right? And BitSight is one that we use as well, right? It's a powerful tool that, when we started deploying BitSight, we looked at it from a perspective of, well, as much as we get inquiries from other people, it's a great way to measure yourself, right? And why not be open and transparent and share that, because it becomes an independent view of your program. So those were really the key things that we looked at. We just didn't want to write a fluff piece that basically said, this is how great we are, we love security. It very much was, these are our risks. This is how we're managing them. This is our long-term strategy and journey. This is where we're at in year 1, year 2, year 3. This is the horizon of where we want to get to. And that is so much more meaningful when it's backed up with independent data points, not just data from our own security program.
Chris, thanks for that. Jason, I want to move over to you for another minute. If you think that investors are very concerned about cyber risk or increasingly focusing on this, then the question is, well, how do they actually evaluate the cybersecurity of an organization? So we know that there is going to be an increased amount of disclosure coming in the weeks and months and years ahead. Certainly that information will be useful to the investor community. But how do you think investors are going to think about company disclosures? What data will they turn to evaluate cybersecurity?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and for me, this has been really a learning journey as well, because obviously I'm not a cyber expert. We don't have cyber experts in our area, so really had to kind of just figure out, okay, this is a risk that is kind of really going places. If you think about kind of the, especially during the pandemic, it became obvious to me that, given the way that the digital attack surface is increasing, this is something that we really need to be doing. Not just from thinking about, oh, cyber is important, but really having a way to measure this objectively, repeatably, kind of, from the outside in, because we can't be running surveys or kind of just, that sort of approach is just not going to cut it for what we're trying to do. So, again, the first thing I learned, and I think everyone can agree, that there's no one kind of do this and cybersecurity is solved. Obviously, if there is, please let me know in the chat or something. But what I think is kind of important here is how do investors deal with this type of information asymmetry? Again, like lack of information, but we still have to do our job and make these decisions. So one of the kind of rubrics that we use is thinking about comparative analysis, especially. So if we can figure out, okay, here's a checklist of things that kind of defines in terms of almost tiering of here's what it takes to be kind of to have good cyber maturity, right? Here are all the different things. Here's kind of level 1, then level 2, then level 3. I mean, we've seen this actually work pretty well for investors to be able to assess on a common framework, and understand where companies are in their journey, where they compare to each other, how we should be pricing those risks. I think that's one way that we can do it. Kind of get an idea of, okay, what does good look like, and then how are you stacking up? And ideally, if that can be done from an external perspective in a consistent way, that's going to be great for us to integrate. And another way, and obviously, is kind of the outside in, kind of full coverage of the entire market. I mean, to be honest, that was really what kind of put the light bulb, set that one off in my mind when I realized that now we could do this. We could basically, have visibility across the entire market, thousands and thousands of issuers every day updated. It is so powerful for tracking those risks and monitoring it in our portfolios, and then pinpointing where we need to engage. That has really been a real enabler for us, and that's why I think it's going to be adopted by quite a lot more mainstream investors across the board.
So Chris, kind of going back to what you were just saying, I mean, you get the benefit of, putting your information out there into the market. At the same time, that the market is leveraging similar data to evaluate your organization. It seems like a win-win for security leaders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It definitely has, I think, been a differentiator for us. Right. And so, highly recommend that others, take that same path. In this instance, maybe a little more structured from the 10K, 8K requirements, but it goes back to the point before. It's that opportunity, right? Make the most of the opportunity, and not have it just be that perfunctory form that you're filling out, but it very much is the opportunity to have a conversation with your leadership, with consumers, with investors about what you're excited about, what the future holds, right? So not just the prescriptive, but our vision, right? And that's kind of what we've tried to do in our annual report, is to provide that narrative of what we've done, where we're going, and why we think it's so critically important.
Let's bring the next poll up. We have a poll on independent benchmarking data. Independent benchmarking data could strengthen our message to shareholders. Yes or no? We'll let you go ahead and comment on that. I want to come back, Roland. Maybe I'll start with you for the next question. You know, sometimes investors engage with companies on cybersecurity issues, and I think that we can expect that that's going to increase in the months and years ahead. And so what I'd love to figure out with the group is, what are some of the best practices when it comes to CISO and shareholder interactions? Roland, maybe we'll start with you and we'll just kind of go around the horn.
Yeah, it's probably an unexpected answer, but my number one thing is educate your CEO, right? Like, the reality is, your CEO is going to be up at, in front of the investors, your CEO and CFO predominantly on a quarterly basis, and representing in front of the shareholders at shareholders meetings. And they're going to be out in the market talking to investors even more than you are, even if you're the public representation of security risk or privacy to your organization. So it's important for the CEO to understand major components of risk, of cyber risk, of the industry and adjacencies, and what's happening to your competitors and how the company's dealing with it. And a great way to start is sit down and gain their level of acumen and what they're concerned about and what they're hearing from their peers, and then create a documented education process for them. You'd be surprised how CEOs will engage at that level to be able to speak to it and articulate intelligently about the higher level risks of their organization and how the company is approaching it. And they are a great mouthpiece for the company. That is one of their primary jobs in the investor community. And so making sure they're educated is important. I think that goes along with Treasury, corporate teams, those sort of organizations that we've talked about, that they spend an awful lot of time, IR with or investor relations with the shareholder and investment community. So making sure that you're aligned on risk representation of the organization and the taxonomy and language used is super important. And also receiving that feedback. We were at an investors meeting in Chicago, and I heard these three things. We were in Tokyo last week, and we heard concerns from that region about this. Making sure that you're engaging in a two-way communication. So when you're providing that information back and you're preparing how the company's going to respond to considerations, concerns, ESG reports, sustainability reports, that you're answering the most important things that the market's asking, not just what you're concerned about. And I think the last thing that I can say is just be a representative of your business. Be out there representing your information. You're delivering the confidence to the market on behalf of the company. Make sure you're confident about what you're doing. Have good prep and understanding about the reports that you're delivering, and be public when appropriate for the organization, and be that representative. If you're not great at public speaking, learn how to do it. A lot of times we speak at security conferences, or we speak, to customers on very specific things. But our positions are going to really change over the next few years, as market confidence will rely on our capabilities to deliver these programs to reduce risk to the organization. And we're going to have to be confident being out there and having those discussions.
Yeah, I'll extend onto that. I think that security is the job of really every individual within a corporation, within a company. right? And we've had great success and great support with our executive committee. Like I said, about Mark being so engaged, but it's also leveraging your CFO, it's leveraging your CIO, your CTO, investor relations, having everyone on that same narrative, everyone understand the importance, and then trying to build that culture into all aspects of your business, right? And I think getting that buy-in and being able, one of the things that Equifax did is we asked every single one, and we still do this today, every single one of our employees to have a security goal, right? And so it feeds that importance into their everyday lives, right? So even someone that doesn't work in security, they might be a marketing analyst, and when they're talking at a dinner party, they're talking about potentially the security goal that they have at Equifax, right? So bringing that in through all levels of your business and being able to have that conversation and being able to share that information at all levels builds on that trust, and hopefully will continue to push these types of narratives forward.
Jason, do you have any thoughts on, because I know that you do a lot of investor engagement exercises. Do you have expectations when you interact with a company on cybersecurity? Can you share those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree with Roland's points there. I mean, that CISOs really need to step up and be an investor-facing part of the company. You are part of our investment decision now, and please act the part. I would say just kind of quick thinking of reviewing back of some of our experiences. Please keep in mind that in many cases, I mean, remember, it's not just the sell side analysts who are on those calls or on those high level meetings. I mean, it's also real money investors, kind of the institutional investors who are doing this work as well. And for us, a lot of times the first point of contact is an IR person, maybe someone in finance, maybe a sustainability person. A lot of times we find that they just do not have a very good view or understanding of cybersecurity. We've been told, this is the first time we've heard of this. You're the only person who's ever asked about this. Sometimes, that's we understand it's a new concept. For a lot of them, we explain what we're trying to do here. Sometimes they're actually kind of derisive and just and sort of blow us off a little bit. That's not a great look for the company, I can tell you that. So please, reach out to those people in your organization, educate them just as you would the CEO, so that they know, kind of what to say and who to call, and they can put a good forth, because I think these kinds of calls will be, and engagement calls will be coming more. For the CISOs, obviously, we tend to take, a risk-based approach. So, if we're coming to you with something, it's because we see something and we're saying something. That's how we're trying to, we come in peace. We're trying to help you do your job, get the resources that you need to protect our asset, your company. So hopefully we can kind of be, working together in that sense. When we get a CISO that's, very, kind of welcoming for the feedback, maybe they're helping us understand what they're doing about that, or how we should, as in kind of cybersecurity experts, understand this type of risk and how we should be looking at it. That's very positive. That kind of gives us a higher conviction. If it's not that, and it's kind of defensive, and that actually kind of raises a big red flag for us, and we've had both cases. So again, please be mindful that you're representing the company, just like the CFO, just like the CEO.
Jason, that was great feedback. I don't know if the guys want to chime in there. Roland, that was exactly what you were talking about earlier about the engagement with the IR team. In this case, is investor relations, right?
Yeah, listen, they're an amazing partner to have. We're practitioners. We defend the world, in our businesses, and we're focused on ensuring consistency with what the company's committed, legalities, jurisdictional, concerns, bad guys, and all of that stuff. But we're a business, and as a public company, an investor's opinion matters, and it's hard to engage in that understanding unless you're truly engaged with the IR organization, and you can then it's kind of like CSO sometimes stands for Chief Sales Officer inside, as you're trying to sell your program to business leaders. It's the same thing with your investors. You want people to trust the company and invest in the organization for its growth and its future. You're a part of that as a senior level executive, and so when you go to speak to someone, you have to know your audience, and there's no better way to do that than engage with the people who are involved with that audience on a daily basis, like IR.
Let's bring up the results of the last poll that we did. Independent benchmarking data could strengthen our message to shareholders. Yep, everybody pretty much agrees that that's the case. So, and you can see how, not only is that benchmarking data useful for the internal reporting up, right? It's designed to give your management and your board confidence. Well, think of what that will also do when you share that then with with external shareholders as well, really standing behind it. So, anybody have any thoughts on this before we jump into the final questions here? I think we covered that one pretty well. Okay, so go ahead and if those on the call can continue to lob some questions our way, and we're going to dive into those in just a second. As we do. My last question to the team is, Chris and Roland, I'm curious if you guys think that there are many operational changes that you're expecting security leaders to implement as a result of SEC. Roland, I'll ask that question of you.
I think there's certainly going to be closer alignment with the Office of the CIO if there hasn't been, because the deep embedded controls specific to technology operations and the digitization of our businesses are going to be important. So how we represent risk, how we collaborate together to ensure that we're protecting our capabilities and our market delivery. I think that's going to be important. Not to say that that CISOs will then go back under CIOs or flip out to some, just that there's going to be a closer reliance on the discussions we have at the board level and at an industry level together. I think it's going to be important. I think operationally, how we talk about incident response, not investor relations, but incident response now, IR. Everyone's using that term apparently, IR. But with Treasury and corp risk, with regards for engagement for materiality, you're going to have to change operationally when an incident or issue happens, as your command staff to an incident, who you're bringing in to be able to help you make a decision, or the business make a decision through that information. And as an incident is ongoing, whether it's cyber related or privacy related or what have you, to be able to understand materiality. So people are going to have to broaden their spectrum of incident response, I think, in general. And then last, probably more on the marketing side. This isn't necessarily cyber operations or engineering or technology delivery or monitoring or any of that, but I think the discussion around sustainability and ESG development and transparency and accountability programs for the organization in general, the CISO and the CISO's business team is going to have to get more involved at a very direct level to ensure that they're engaging the business to be able to have those discussions as well.
Yeah, I'll add on to the incident response part. I think that's, critically important because of the focus based on this requirement. And it really comes down to, I think that, it's about being ready, readiness, right? Being ready to respond. It's like, practice, practice, practice. My daughter plays competitive soccer. Her coach says, you play like you practice, so bring it, right? And it's going through those types of exercises on a regular basis. So when it happens, because it is only a matter of when, not if, you are ready, right? And your teams are ready. And that's not just from a security perspective, but it's an organizational perspective, right? So your communications team is ready, your CFO is ready, your IR is ready, everyone's ready, you're all coordinated, so you can begin framing those risks and having those conversations in a manner that shows that you are ready to take on this challenge.
All right, team, we got a bunch of questions. We're going to do some rapid fire over the next 3 to 4 minutes here. Chris, there's a question about does public transparency about cybersecurity strategies and measures help the attackers? You obviously have a take on this.
Yeah, well, I think you want to be mindful of what it is that you share, right? And you look at our annual security report. It provides a good context. It talks about the risks. It doesn't necessarily tell you what we're potentially vulnerable to or exploitable. So you want to be mindful of that, and having various levels of engagement, right? Obviously, we share a lot of information with our customers, right? More so than we do with the public, just because we want to be open and transparent about our journey and what it is that we're doing from a security perspective. So it's a balanced approach, right? You want to make sure you don't provide information that's going to put you at risk, but walking that line and trying to be as transparent as you possibly can, I think is really the way to go.
This is one of the advantages of having the independent benchmarking too. It gives
Absolutely.
you context in the right. There were only 30 questions about materiality, which is an issue that we did not get into much today. It's one that I know everybody is really focusing on. So, if I could summarize the questions, I would ask them, Roland, what's the role of the CISO in being involved in assessing materiality?
To have detail and data associated with incidents, issues, and risk and capabilities. I mean, that's it, right? We shouldn't be the one deciding materiality, but we should talk about the problem, the probability, and the consequences, and downstream residual risk associated with that. So then the business can make those type of materiality. And by the way, there's models for that to follow. We did this for SOX. We did this for other issues that popped up in certain industries after breaches occurred, to be able to have a discussion around materiality and board requirements. So I think there are some models out there to follow, but at the end of the day, a lot of good information and understanding of what happened and what potentially can happen based on the impact of the incident itself.
Last question. What do we anticipate SEC enforcement is going to look like, especially around the mandatory reporting timelines? Chris, do you have thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I don't really. It'll be interesting to see, with this administration and next administration, whichever one that is, what type of focus we get there. I think it will be, it ties back also to the materiality question, right? But I think, as an organization and how we're looking at it, we have a framework. We want to be open. We want to be transparent. We're going to follow the regulation and share the appropriate information. But it'll be interesting to see what type of activity comes, starting in 24.
Yes, and I do know that nobody wants to be the one getting hauled in front of the SEC for failing to disclose things. So, gentlemen, let's go around one last time. Closing remarks. Jason, why don't we start with you, please?
Sure. Well, I kind of wanted to respond a little bit to that materiality question, because obviously, we think about materiality from a risk perspective, downside especially, but when I looked at cybersecurity, really make it meaningful for people, not just as a tech issue, right, but really as kind of like a broader issue, we were thinking about what is the materiality of, if this sector, if this industry, if this company goes down, what's the impact on society, right? I mean, we saw with the pipelines and, critical national infrastructure. This is the kind of thing that we actually need to be protecting, and cybersecurity and our pricing of that risk and our valuing that in the market, I think is going to be a really important part. So please think about the materiality, from that perspective as well, and in terms of the services and goods that you're providing to our society.
Chris,
like I said just a moment ago, it's be ready, right? This is coming at us, right? As persistent threats all the time, right? So be ready to respond. Have your structure in place. So you can successfully navigate.
Roland.
Truth, transparency, and excellence in your program equals trust to the market. And I think that's what this is all based on.
Appreciate the panel. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our audience. Please reach out to BitSight if you have any information or if we can help you out. Have a great day.
Thank you.